So if you look at these footprints, that's probably exactly what you will find. You go to the museums of the world, they will tell you that there are over 100 published theories about the extinction of the dinosaurs. And they will tell you there was a meteorite that struck the earth, but why is everything else still there? Why selectively destroy these? Or did storms land the dinosaurs in hot water? There are lots of theories, but there's one theory that they all deny, and that is that they were destroyed in a flood. Yet all the evidence points to flood deposition. Now if you look at some of these fossils that we find, like these intricate ferns and intricate leaf structures, or if we look at coal deposits, look at this, coal seams are flat deposits, and that's totally unlike what you would expect, because science tells us that the forests, as they went up the hill and down the hill, the trees fell over, went and got compacted and eventually formed coal. Impossible. What happens to trees that fall over today in forests? They rot away and they're recycled. But if you're going to trap them as coal, you must have a totally different scenario. Only a flood can explain something like this. So you have huge floating mats and you cover them, and then you have these deposits. Here you have an upside down tree in a coal seam. This shows that it was catastrophic. Now listen to this. George Gaylord Simpson was one of the doyens of evolutionary thinking, one of the fathers of the evolutionary thought process. He's also one that said that God has to be totally ignored in any relationship of evolution. He says it has been suggested that all animals are now specialized, and that generalized forms on which major evolutionary development depends are absent. In fact, he says, all animals have always been more or less specialized, and a really generalized living form is a myth or an abstraction. When you look at a textbook of evolution, you will find the bottom organisms are simple little creatures, and that they get more and more complicated as you go up the line. That's not true. He says that's a myth. All organisms were always complicated. There's no such thing as a simple organism. So if everything was there at the beginning, and everything was complicated from the beginning, then what does that sound like to you folks?
Creation.
It sounds like creation to me. Gould says the family trees that adorn our textbooks are based on inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of the fossils. That's from the horse's mouth. So if you go into the record and you find here evidence in stone, look at all these little fossils over here, thousands of them packed into the stone. That's catastrophism. They were washed in. You find corals that they say are ancient corals, but they're recycled. They're upside down in the rocks. In other words, they were smashed ancient corals and recycled and buried as fossils. So these creatures don't exist today, these ammonites, but they were highly complex, squid-like creatures, and there's nothing primitive about them. Or the trilobite. Nothing primitive about this arthropod. Complicated, there, and then gone. There's no such thing as a simple organism. They made tunnels, they were buried instantly. These delicate sea lilies, these crinoids, there and buried. And if you look at these creatures over here, there's the fossil, there's the living form. If you look at the turtles and the tortoises of the world, there's the fossil, there's the living form. No change. No change. Exactly the same as they were in the past, except for size. If you look at the sharks, if you look at the fish, if you look at the marine mammals, they were there in the past, they're exactly the same today. There is no evidence for any evolution from one form to the other. No intermediate forms. If you look at this one over here, ancient nautilus, there's the living form, there's the fossil. No change. In many, many fossils, the whole of the insect world, the fossils are exactly the same as today. I can't believe it, Fred. 60 million years since I've seen you and you haven't changed a bit. So the fossil record does not support evolution. You would expect exactly the opposite. Every textbook, every university exhibit, every museum exhibit will give you the evolution of the horse from a small creature all the way up to more and more complex ones. Is that right or wrong? That's what you find. And you find that the lowest one over there, they put Eohippus, which was actually something that looked like a rock hyrax. Its original name was Hyracotherium because it looked like a hyrax. And then it goes from small to large. Now that's logical. If I give you a bag of dog skulls, and you've never seen dogs, I give you a whole bag full of dog skulls, and I say go to your museum and arrange them according to the way in which they evolved. What is the most logical sequence you would adopt? Small to large. And if you made a tree of them, you would put those with the flat faces, you know, like a chihuahua to a bulldog, on the one side of the branch, and those with the lean faces, like the whippets and the Afghans and those, the long-snouted ones, on another side of the branch, right? And the sort of medium ones in the middle, and you could make a whole beautiful tree of how they evolved, and your base dog would be, well, whatever, small to large, could be something like, I don't know, one of those little things or whatever at the bottom. Make a beautiful exhibit like that. It would be perfectly logical, but would be absolutely wrong. Because the dog was evolved not by evolution, but by human selection out of the wolf and the wild dogs. Did you know that the coyote and the wolf are two species, right? If you go to the west coast of Canada, then the coyote is tiny and it doesn't breed with the wolf at all. Two distinct ones. If you go to central Canada, you will find that the coyote is much larger and interbreeds freely with the wolf. So who says that they are two different species? If you go to Australia, you have the dingo, which is an endangered species. Why? Because it readily breeds with a dog. Let me tell you what, the dingo is a dog. That's it. So, nothing strange about it. And then also, you have this question of the toes and the question of the ribs. The rib numbers just change. And another thing is that all these creatures occurred at the same time. So it's a morphological sequence. They're all there at the same time. It's like a bag of bones that you take to the lab, and now you're piecing them together. This is not the evidence of the fossil record. The one is not lower in the record than the other. They're there at the same time. So to sum up for you, the fossils appear at the same time. The different organisms appear at the same time. They are there at the same time. It's an explosion. There are more creatures in the past than there are now, and they were larger in the past than they are now. And every single one of those points is directly the opposite of what evolution requires. Did you know that? Directly the opposite. And I knew that as a scientist. I was a Darwinist when I started off. And because of the evidence, I switched